Your 401k is about to be wiped out, and we are heading towards mass homelessness on a scale never seen before in American history. That is the latest warning from Robert Kiyosaki, the best-selling author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, in his latest interview. If you do not know who Kiyosaki is, you need to. He is the best-selling personal finance author of all time. Rich Dad, Poor Dad has sold over 40 million copies worldwide. He co-authored 2 books with the current US president. He has been warning about currency debasement, the collapse of paper assets, and the theft of wealth through money printing for over 2 decades. He was in Zimbabwe when their dollar collapsed and had AK-47s pointed at his face. He knows what happens when the system breaks because he has lived through it firsthand. In this interview, he warns that the S&P 500 bubble is about to blow, that your pension and your 401k are being set up for the biggest wealth transfer in history, that banks are dumping treasuries to buy gold, and that the same thing he watched happen in Zimbabwe is now repeating in the United States. And before we jump into it, just a quick reminder, only a small percentage of you watching are actually subscribed. If you are getting value from the videos, hit that subscribe button. It is free, it supports the channel, and you can always change your mind later. Now, here is exactly what he said.
And my prediction is this is as dire and as pessimistic as I can get. And is that this ERISA was set up to steal our wealth. It's called Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 401k. The S&P 500 of the stock market is the highest it's ever been in history. We've blown it into a bubble. It's like, the cartoon Peanuts with Charlie Brown and Lucy, where Lucy holds the football and she says, "Come on, Charlie Brown, come on, kick the ball." And Charlie Brown says, "No, you're going to pull it away from me." She says, "No, I won't." So Charlie Brown winds up and Lucy convinces him that she won't pull the football away. And Charlie Brown goes charging ahead, kicks, she pulls the football away, and he falls on his butt. That's what they're going to do to the boomers, because when this S&P 500 blows and crashes, then we're going to be more homeless people than ever before, and there'll be boomers who one time had jobs and had money, and they're going to steal their wealth via the pension. So I'm very concerned, because my generation is going to be the first generation that mass homelessness because of 401k is going to be toasted.
Well, look, Robert, we're already seeing that. People can't retire. People who were retired, right, are going back to get part-time work. And I know so many children who are supporting their parents, helping their parents.
It's a major, major disaster we have coming. The boomer generation had it the easiest, because when I left the Marine Corps in 1974, it was so easy to make money because Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard in 1971. Inflation took off. And so I was buying real estate like crazy, and real estate just went up and up and up and up and up and up. But what goes up must come down.
So there is Robert Kiyosaki warning that the 401k system is a ticking time bomb, that the S&P 500 bubble is about to blow, and that when it does, an entire generation of boomers is going to be wiped out. And the data right now is confirming every piece of his thesis. The S&P 500 Shiller-Kate ratio is sitting near 40, the second highest reading ever recorded. The only higher reading was late 1999, right before the dot-com crash. The Buffett indicator is at 213%, the highest on record. Both of these indicators flagged the dot-com bust and the 2008 crisis before they happened. Both are flashing red right now. The S&P 500 is already down 4% on the year. All 3 major indices have broken below their 200-day moving averages. On housing, which Kiyosaki built his wealth in and knows intimately, Redfin reported 630,000 more sellers than buyers last month, the largest gap ever recorded going back to 2013. Pending home sales hit a record low. Homes are 30% overvalued. In commercial real estate, the CMBS office loan delinquency rate hit 12.34% in January 2026, the worst ever recorded and worse than the 2008 financial crisis. $930 billion in commercial real estate debt is maturing this year. On the recession, Moody's Analytics puts the probability at nearly 49%. Goldman Sachs has it at 30%. The University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index just hit its all-time low, the worst reading in 70 years of data. 86% of Americans say gas prices are their top financial concern. Moody's confirmed the top 10% of earners drive nearly half of all consumer spending. Deloitte says the bottom half of the economy is effectively already in recession. And on the national debt that Kiyosaki has been warning about for decades, the numbers are staggering. $39 trillion and growing by $1 trillion every 6 months. Professor Steve Hanke published research in Fortune showing $6 trillion in government assets against $136 trillion in total liabilities. The country is technically insolvent, and they cannot stop printing. Now, Kiyosaki explains what happens when money collapses. He does not have to guess. He was there when it happened in Zimbabwe. And he says the same thing is now repeating in America.
And we were talking before we went on the air. I was in Zimbabwe when the Zimbabwe dollar collapsed. And boy, you haven't lived until you see what happens when the money collapses. The Zim dollar collapsed, and there I was like this. I had these black soldiers with AK-47s, their guns in my face, stealing everything. I mean, took my watches, took everything with me. And I said, I'm back in Vietnam again. I'm back in Vietnam again. But that's what happens when money destroys nations. I see the same things repeating. What I saw in Zimbabwe, I see repeating here, which I saw in Vietnam. So I'm a hardcore. I ask people, please buy some green boxes of silver, so that's real money, and buy real gold. Don't buy paper stuff. Get some, I mean, you can have paper, but you need to have real money, real gold and silver. And the biggest secret of all is how many banks are dumping treasuries to buy gold. So the shift is on right now, and by having the dollar remain strong, the price of gold remains weaker. Same as silver. So they're just playing games with money again. And the average American is like, oh, they watch CNBS, as they call it, and they don't get the facts. My hero is Jim Rickards. I think he's calling for $35,000 gold. And then I think $200 silver is easy. And again, it's just because we can't stop printing. Another book is The Big Print by Larry Lepard. Everybody should read the book because they can't stop printing. That's the issue. It's not gold or silver. It's that we have the most incompetent political leaders possible, called the Federal Reserve Bank, and they're printing and printing and printing.
So that is Kiyosaki speaking from personal experience. He was in Zimbabwe when it happened. He had guns in his face. He watched an entire currency go to zero overnight. And he is telling you the same pattern is repeating in the United States right now. The gold market is confirming the shift he describes. Gold is above $4,650 an ounce, up over $1,600 from a year ago. Silver is above $75, up more than 140% year on year. Central bank gold purchases have hit record levels for 3 consecutive years. Russia, China, India, Turkey, Poland, all accumulating physical gold at unprecedented speed. And as Kiyosaki points out, the biggest secret is the number of banks that are dumping treasuries to buy gold. The US Treasury's own capital flow data shows sustained pressure on foreign holdings of US debt. On bonds, the stress is visible in real time. The 10-year Treasury yield hit 4.4%, the highest since last July. The 30-year is approaching 5%. Treasury auctions have drawn weak demand while $10 trillion needs to be rolled over in the next 12 months. The bond market is not acting like a safe haven. It is acting like an asset under pressure. On the oil shock that is accelerating everything, Brent crude has spiked above $112. The dated Brent price, the benchmark for physical oil deliveries, hit $144, the highest ever recorded. Gas has crossed $4.16 nationally. In California, it is approaching $6. In Los Angeles, $7 a gallon. Diesel is forecast to peak above $5.80 this month. And the consumer is already breaking. Americans are using buy now, pay later for groceries. People who are retired are going back to work. Children are supporting their parents financially. The bottom half of the economy is effectively already in recession according to Deloitte. This is the setup Kiyosaki has been warning about for 20 years. The pension system was built on the assumption that the S&P 500 goes up forever. That assumption is about to be tested. Now here is his final warning about what is coming and what you should be doing about it.
Which is why I prefer real money, gold and silver. And I am for real. I've taken companies public on the New York Stock Exchange, my gold mines and my silver mines. And I'm very much a hard money advocate, not this fake money, print money stuff. Because we've got to wake people up. They're stealing our wealth via printing fake money. Of course I am. And, I am a big fat furry bear pessimist. I love green boxes of silver. And people say, why do you like silver? They talk about solar panels and all this. Is that because I was in Vietnam, I know what money is. And I take the silver eagle and I can spend it. So I have lots of silver eagles hidden in a vault someplace in Zurich that if I have to go and spend it, I'll just go and spend that. I don't trust a dollar. If you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I said savers are losers because you're saving the dollar, which they're printing like crazy. So there's another book I recommend out. It's called When Money Destroys Nations by Philip Haslam, Haslam. And we were talking before we went on the air. I was in Zimbabwe when the Zimbabwe dollar collapsed. The number of people that are buying gold, they're not saying anything and just stashing it overseas. Like, outside of Zurich, lots of people are storing gold out there and in Singapore. But the average American doesn't see it because they're not aware. So because the average person goes, oh, no, tomorrow will be like today. And I said, no, I've seen it.
That's true.
I've seen it differently.
So there is Robert Kiyosaki laying out the full picture, and his warning is the most personal of any guest we have covered. He is not speaking from a spreadsheet. He's speaking from a battlefield and from a collapsing country where he had guns pointed at his face. He has seen what happens when money dies. He watched it in Zimbabwe. He lived through it in Vietnam. And he is telling you that the same pattern is now unfolding in the United States. An insolvent government printing money it cannot back up, a stock market blown into the biggest bubble in history, a pension system designed to transfer wealth from the working class to the institutions that manage it, and a population that has no idea what is coming. The S&P 500 is at the second highest valuation in history. The national debt is $39 trillion and growing by $1 trillion every 6 months. $136 trillion in total liabilities when Social Security and Medicare are included. Commercial real estate defaults at all-time highs. The consumer at the breaking point. Recession odds approaching a coin flip, and central banks around the world dumping treasuries and buying physical gold at the fastest rate in decades. Gold above $4,650. Silver above $75. Kiyosaki's mentor Jim Rickards is forecasting $35,000 gold. Kiyosaki himself says $200 silver is easy. And the reason is simple. They cannot stop printing. They never could. And the longer they print, the more worthless the dollar becomes and the more valuable real assets become. His advice is as blunt as it gets. Buy real gold. Buy real silver. Do not trust the dollar. Do not trust your 401k. And do not assume that tomorrow will look like today. Because the people who assume that in Zimbabwe woke up one morning with nothing. The question is no longer whether the system is breaking. The question is whether you will be holding real assets or paper promises when it does. Stay informed, stay prepared, and make sure you are subscribed because we are tracking every development as this unfolds.